News: Virginia Tech is expected to hire Penn State tight ends coach Ty Howle as offensive coordinator. We'll break down that instant reactions here on this instant reaction episode of Kolby's Corner from Tuesday, December 9th, coming from Blacksburg, Virginia, year of our Lord 2025. We'll jump into past history, what it means, some instant reactions, and get out here. Thank you for everyone joining. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for all the staffing updates, as it's going to get very crazy here down the stretch. Thank you for the support. Subscribe to the channel. Quick episode hitter just to try and get into this reaction. Jump into live chat, trying to get in some questions and reactions. But first off, obviously, James Franklin made that first big splash in hiring Brent Pry to be the defensive coordinator. Makes his next coordinator hire Ty Howle. Obviously, someone who has been with Franklin since 2020, has an illustrious career of coaching tight ends. We'll get into that a little bit. First off, let's get into the resume. Played at Penn State from 2009 to 2013, was an offensive lineman, then was a GA at NC State. Shout out Doug Bowman over on VT Scoop. Then moved to Western Illinois as an offensive line coach for 2 seasons, and then 2 seasons at Western Illinois. Spent time as assistant head coach, co-OC and offensive line. It's under my impression that he was not the play caller there for those 2 years. Then jumped back to Penn State, his alma mater, to be an analyst 2021 and 2022. Served as tight ends coach, and then 23 till 25 served as a co-offensive coordinator and tight end, but was not calling the plays. So very interesting career trajectory at 34 years old, very young play caller, but someone who's seen a lot, a dynamic recruiter. I think it's really important to say, dance around this a little bit on the show. We'll get into what I said on the show last night, obviously talking about as John David Baker just signs with Ole Miss. He interviewed there, the offensive coordinator at East Carolina. It seemed like Virginia Tech was building there. It seemed like there were a couple flags and they decided to move another direction. Sounds like last night it was really working that way towards Ty Howle, but didn't want to go head over heels for that. But it definitely sounded like this had been in the works there for a little while and was progressing towards that way to bring on Howle. It's just, when you draw the comparisons, I even mentioned it last night. First name Ty, coach tight ends and was an offensive lineman and was at Penn State. Yeah, first time offensive coordinator calling plays. It's just a lot of similarities between Tyler Bowen and Ty Howle. Except, Tyler Bowen was in the NFL with Jacksonville. But it just seems with everything, being a first-time play caller, probably just instant reaction, like I said, without ever coaching a snap, leaves a little bit to be desired for the offensive coordinator hire. I think a lot of people were expecting with the resource pool to maybe go get someone a little bit more experienced, but Franklin has been known to promote from within. This is someone he circled and wanted to go get and bring in, has been operating as co-offensive coordinator there with Kotelnicki there for a couple years, and going through multiple interview processes. Sounds like he was the guy. So they moved, and obviously if this gets done before the bowl game, it's probably going to cost a little bit more than it would after, but they feel like it's important to get in the room, start evaluating the talent, and moving from there. With him, I think it's really important to note his dynamic recruiting, and something that's been buzzing around him is that he's going to be bringing his room with him. Part of that room is 24/7 Sports 5-star athlete coming out of high school, Luke Reynolds from Connecticut, Andrew Olesh, high-rated 4-star in the top 247 last year. Matt Henderson, a 4-star from Virginia, is also up at Penn State, hearing connections there to be bringing some of the room there. I think it's really interesting to see what does that do for retention. Jarickis Hairston, him and Benji Gosnell are obviously hearing from multiple suitors at this time. How does this hire change your perception of Virginia Tech? How does that room shape up? When you look at what Philip Montgomery did with the tight end position this year and how it was sort of abandoned or not really touched on, and then to see how where it is really a focal point of, obviously he hasn't had his full offense to curate yet, but it's obviously been a massive emphasis. I think he was the tight ends coach of the year last year from Football Scoop. Obviously, Coach Tyler Warren, All-American, was instrumental, I believe, in bringing Freiermuth in, a couple other NFL guys. So you would think it would heavily revolve around that position, 12 personnel. So I think that is going to be really interesting on how you recruit moving forward. Obviously, bringing in a Pierce Peterson, if Isaiah Pena signs a couple of these tight end guys. John Patrick Oates was a tight end. JP Oates was a tight end, obviously coming out, probably going to shift to linebacker. But how do they recruit moving forward? It's very, very interesting to see what style he's going to run. Now, with that, he was a co-offensive coordinator. Do they bring in a co-OC to sort of work alongside him? Not sure, but this sounds like a name that was circled on, like I said, on the show last night. Brought it up in the offensive coordinator discussion. Didn't want to hammer it in too much, obviously, just with the timing of certain things, but it did sound like it was moving that direction. And I know And I think it's going to be pretty widely spread that it's not going to be the most popular hire just with the optics of it. But good thing there's 9 months until the season starts and it really starts to play out. But they moved in early, and Penn State has not played their bowl game yet. So obviously Franklin felt pretty convicted to make the move, and they went ahead and did that. Obviously, if you're just joining, has stops at Western Illinois as an offensive line coach and assistant head coach and a co-OC. Stops at Penn State as an analyst, tight ends coach, co-OC, and tight end. Been coaching as a GA since 2014, so over a decade of experience. Was a co-OC at Penn State for 2023 and 2024 and 2025, leading their offenses obviously under Drew Aller, and last year going to a college football semifinal. So a lot of reactions. Make sure to dump any reactions in the chat. We'll get to some of those and we'll get out here. Just thought it was worth a quick reaction based on the show last night where some of the intel was. Obviously, Ricky Ronnie still say, people thought that was going to be an option. It did not sound like Ricky Ronnie was going to leave Old Dominion for Virginia Tech at this time. I think he is genuinely happy down there and talking to connections and, looking to maybe parlay that into a bigger opportunity if you can stack success down there. There with, as well as John David Baker, obviously getting the news of Ole Miss. Sounds like he interviewed with, obviously, Virginia Tech, was never extended an offer, so went elsewhere and landed at Ole Miss. So they get their offensive coordinator, obviously Elaine Disciple, someone who's familiar with Pete Golding down there. But there's some flags, and obviously there's a familiarity with Howle and Franklin. Decided to make a move at that position. So, a lot of reactions. I think first off is that tight end position. When you hear what's bubbling around the name, is that he's going to bring the room with him. And that room has a high school 5-star. And I know Luke Reynolds maybe hasn't lived up to the exact same hype. He was sort of supplanted in there to be the next Tyler Warren, but he has a lot of those tools, a couple hundred receiving yards this year. Now, what does retention look like of Benji, Hairston, and then what guys do you bring down? Do you bring down a true freshman, Andrew Alesh? You bring down Matt Henderson. Obviously, has Pierce Peterson coming out of high school. The tight end room, I'm sure, will be completely flipped. So that will be definitely something to monitor in the transfer portal, those names, those targets from Penn State and following Howle. Also, how does he fill out the rest of his staff? It'll be very interesting. Obviously, sounds like Fontel Mines is set to be retained. Matt Moore along the offensive line. Sounds like he will be retained as well. Does Hagens come down? It's been rumored there for quite a while, hearing from multiple contacts for a couple of weeks that you could potentially bring Hagens down. I know he maybe hasn't had the most resounding positive reports from Penn State, but moving him to wide receivers, Fontel back to tight ends where he coached at Old Dominion where he played, is that in the realm? I'm not sure. Where do they go at running back? Where do they go? I think that'll be interesting. Quarterback coach as well. I think that'll certainly be interesting, as you've seen over the last couple of years. Quarterback coach. Maybe they bring in a quarterback coach and co-OC. Oh, we shall see. But it did sound like last night during the show and even after, momentum was heavily building, if not already done with Ty Howle. Just didn't want to go head over heels and burn anyone. So it was building that way. They conducted a couple of interviews and, it sounded like the guy. It sounds like they were very extensive interviews as well, stemming multiple hours. And it sounds like they took their pick of Howle over John David Baker. So as being reported, John David Baker has been in Oxford days ahead of the CFP. So I think it was pretty understood there for a while after the interview with John David Baker. Once not getting the offer, that job at Virginia Tech probably wasn't going to be on the table. And I think they just jumped at Howle and they liked it. Now, the comparison to Tyler Bowen, I'm sure, will be something he won't be able to escape, especially if he faces any struggles there early, which is it's just part of it. And it's the same fatigue that's going to happen with Brent Pry if he faces any struggles early, obviously with the fatigue of the fan base. So it'll be very interesting to see how this all plays out. But yeah, so some of those instant thoughts, recruiting, what the scheme's going to look like to run 12 personnel, which is different than what you've seen with Montgomery. And honestly, I guess even Bowen a little bit there in the past. He leaned into that a little bit, but it'll be something to monitor this offseason. The recruiting aspect of what guys come in the portal, I highlighted a couple names there that I would 100% watch for the transfer portal coming down from Penn State and following. But yeah, make sure to subscribe to the channel, dump some questions in the live chat. Quick show, going to go through some of these instant reactions, and yeah, we'll get out of here with all the content. VTscoop.com, 50% off. Evan G. Watkins just ran the staff tracker article. That is the place to stay updated on all the updates as the staff fills out. This is a nice outlet to come live every once in a while, but that is the place to be for all the latest updates all the time. But thank you for the support. Make sure to get over to VTscoop.com. 50% off promo going right now. Place to be. All right, let's jump into some of these comments. Hope everyone's having a great Tuesday, start to the week. Virginia Tech, for all the ire about making the hires early, they got their 2 coordinators. I know it's not official from the school, so you're going to have pushback from that, but getting your coordinator set in place December 9th, pretty much a full month before the transfer portal, is kind of about as good as a position you could want to sit in. Now, how do those coordinators shape up? That'll be a whole nother issue, but it seems both those coordinators are pretty good recruiters, and you're going to need them heading into the transfer portal. So let's jump into some of these comments now. Got Denzel Jones. Appreciate you always jumping in the live chat, man. Thank you so much. It means a ton. With the new massive budget, getting a first-time play caller is a little uneasy, but must trust Coach Franklin. I think that's the perception and feeling from a lot of different fans or shareholders of the program, where you still feel the skeletons in the closet. You still feel a little bit of the uneasiness of that first-time play caller, but at the same time, they're going to relinquish a little bit of that, I guess, anguish or instability feeling to Franklin and his past decade-long of success run at Penn State and sort of doing it his way. I mean, now you can point to some concerns along the offensive coordinator hire position that you've seen a little bit of issues maybe, but I think overall people, at least, you're going to be given that grace period. No reason to worry until you give me a reason to worry in that regard. But I think the budget, when you see that staff budget and to go out and get a first-time play caller, maybe that gives people a little bit different perception than what they expected. But that just allows more funds to go out and get a better support staff around, which I think is really big. And I said this when Franklin was hired. As big as the head coach is, the surrounding staff will be just as big. Obviously, now you have the coordinator set. Those position coaches around the coordinators will be just as key. So vtscoop.com for all the updates. But I think that's a very nuanced and measured reaction to it all. Got T. Nelson sort of on the other side. Not a fan. I'll trust Franklin, though. We shall see. And that's kind of what it is. It's always a Tom Fornelli line. You would say Ty Howle is a great hire for I think Ty Howle is a great fit and hire for Virginia Tech. I have no idea if it'll work out. And that's kind of what it is right now. You can point to the recruiting chops. You can point to never calling plays. But a lot has to play out on the field. So everyone's just sort of tuned in for the ride. Got D. Hill talking about JDB and Ole Miss. Yep, we talked about that. Trey Smith sort of on the reaction. You'll definitely see this, and especially on the VT Scoop message board, I'm sure fired it up there for a little bit this morning. I'm going to be there all morning ahead of my final this evening when I should be studying, but saying this ain't it. I'm sure you'll definitely see a lot of that notion over on the message boards, as people expected probably a more experienced play caller with the funding that was behind this. But Franklin went out and got the guy that he wanted, conducted multiple interviews. I think that's all you can point to in the process. Got better than the average saying in James Franklin. If James Franklin believes in him, I'm willing to trust. I think a lot of people are sort of in that same boat. Corey, meh. And then better than average saying, any chance of him bringing other Penn State players, or was tight end the majority of his coaching experience? Any word on Coach Dex? Great question there. He was a dynamic recruiter. I would say tied to him, I would say mostly the tight end position. Now, his highest ranked recruit ever was 5-star Danny Donna-Sutton from McDonough School in Maryland. He was a defensive lineman. I believe he's already gone and graduated or transferred out. But I would say mostly the tight end position. You will see some carryover from Penn State, maybe not directly tied to Howle. But I mean, offensive players obviously want to play for him. Maybe a couple of offensive linemen. But I've heard specifically that tight end room will be, or at least parts of that tight end room will be coming with him. So that is definitely something to monitor. And on Dex, sounds like they're trying to hit press on him as well to bring him in on the defensive side of the ball. Someone they've targeted, after Terry Smith, obviously, was someone they missed on. So no real updates there, but it sounds like they're still working to get that done. Got Brendan saying, wait, how are they not extending an offer to JDB, asking for all this money to not spend it on proven guys? Sounds like they conducted an interview and not flags, but it just sounds like didn't meet the benchmarks they were looking for. Not to take anything away from them. Obviously, Ole Miss felt like it was a fit, but just sounds like Virginia Tech wanted to move in a different direction for whatever reason. Ozzy family saying he likes all the hires. Got Robert saying it doesn't seem like Franklin is comfortable hiring many people outside of his circle. Did you hear anything negative about John David Baker? I mean, there's a couple things circulating around JDB externally if you go on SEC meme Twitter, but I mean, beyond that, I don't think anything. Obviously got a very, very, very prestigious job at Ole Miss. So, obviously he knows how to coach football. It's just, I'm not sure what popped up in the interview process, but there's flags on everyone. I think J Brew 7396 is how a lot of people feel. A little indecision. Not sure how to make him feel, because I think a lot of people had expectations when you see that staff budget and all that rollout in the $220 million plan to boost athletics. It's like, okay, let's go build out a great staff. And that's not to say Ty Howle won't be satisfactory play caller. It's just you haven't proven it. And I think there's a lot of fatigue there, especially with Virginia Tech. Obviously, built-in fatigue of hiring first-time coordinators. I know Brent Pry has a wealth of experience calling a defense, but on the offensive side of the ball, it just seems eerily similar to Tyler Bowen, which, is very, very fresh for a lot of Virginia Tech fans and stakeholders. Got better than the average, saying I'm fine with it. Continuity is worth something, and with the budget and expectations, I wouldn't worry until given a reason to. People are definitely feeling that. Got Trey Smith, I think, leaning into what a lot of people say. Franklin has really re-emphasized in a lot of media availabilities and opportunities to say he wants to go to a more high-flying, spread-out offense where the wide receiver can make one guy miss and go 80 yards, as opposed to a running back go out into the high-scoring, flashy offense with the weather. He ultimately did the opposite. But like I said, he hasn't given the opportunity to call plays, so I don't think it's fair to make that assessment. But coming from the background of being an offensive line coach, tight end coach, 12 personnel, that maybe wouldn't line up as directly. But like I said, it's hard to make an assessment until you've even gotten into camp or anything. But I can see where that could be an early reservation. Got Prometheus Cannabis Corner saying he's worried. I think some people fall into that. Better than the average saying, touch on this a little bit in the show last night. Make sure to subscribe to the channel down below. Click on the channel. You can go to live stream last night. Went over an hour talking about some of this stuff once we got over the audio issues. But thank you, everyone. Who are we feeling as most likely candidates from the current staff to be retained? I'm happy to hear about Mines, but haven't heard much on Brooks and Price, who are my biggest hopes, along with Mines. I would say Fontel, Mines, and Matt Moore for those on-field coaches. And beyond that, really haven't heard much or not much work in there. Got VT Hokie saying it seems like we should have so much money with our coaching staff budget. What do we use this on? I think Brent Pry's contract structure is going to be very interesting. I think Ty Howle's contract structure is going to be interesting when those financials come out. So it's something we'll monitor, and we'll have the latest on vtscoop.com. If anything, it just allows you to be way more aggressive in filling out the rest of the on-field coaches and analyst positions. Got Prometheus saying anytime you hire someone that hasn't done the job that you're hiring for them, it's a problem. I think a lot of people will point to that. And there's been a lot of nuanced discussion in this chat. And I think there's a rash of emotion to the reaction. So kind of why I wanted to jump on here, touch on some of the recruiting, obviously his experience and not calling plays before is what it sounds like. Yeah, Wilson Avila saying, can Howle recruit? That's the biggest thing. And that's what I sort of touched on with the open. I know we're in the Q&A section, but I think that's probably one of his best calling cards. But now in this day and age of college football, coordinators aren't like the recruiters they used to be. They don't go out on the road as much as the position coaches, or let alone the head coach. So some of those chops are sort of mired behind. Now in this cycle specifically, I think a lot of his recruiting chops will be shown through the transfer portal and the guys he gets to follow him from Penn State. So that'll definitely be something to watch, obviously, as he's amassed a very talented room up there at Penn State. Like I said, 5-star athlete coming out of high school. Luke Reynolds, as well as Matt Henderson from Powhatan, Virginia, and Luke Olesh, or Andrew Olesh, I'm sorry, from up there. So he's got a very dynamic room, and there's a couple other players, but have heard around him speculating that he's going to be bringing the room with him. So those are going to be names to watch for sure in the transfer portal, and has recruited very well out of high school. Got Matthew saying perhaps this move could save some money to bulk up and make the staff stronger. For example, Dex, even not as DC, may be expensive. 100%. And that's what I was just going to touch on. That is going to be expensive. So it could allow you to build out a better staff on both sides of the ball. I'm not sure how those financials are going to work out, but that definitely could be a part of it. Got VT Hokie saying, who else from Penn State do we see coming coach-wise? A couple names to watch. I think Poindexter at safeties and co-DC on the defensive side is someone they're pushing for. Dan Connor at the linebacker position is a name to watch, as well as Lustig for special teams coordinator. Some of those names have definitely continued to circulate. Got Denzel Jones saying, can we expect to see a domino effect with staff hiring now? I'm not so sure on that aspect of it. I think maybe just getting the coordinators in place was really important. Maybe start to see some other names who don't have bowl obligations to work in. But I think now that you've got those guys set, you're going to try and wait and save as much coin to build out the rest of the staff until possible. But yeah, with that, got to sort of the end of the comments. Just wanted to do a quick hitter. I know a lot of people obviously in the middle of the workday. Appreciate everyone jumping in here. Virginia Tech expected to name Ty Howle, tight ends coach and co-offensive coordinator at Penn State the last 3 years. Virginia Tech's new offensive coordinator under James Franklin. Quick reaction. Thank you for all the support. Subscribe to the channel down below. Like the video. Drop a comment. And go over to vtscoop.com. 50% off for the latest updates to be ahead of the curve on all this coaching search. But thank you guys. Subscribe to the channel. We'll see you tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. normal time. Till then, have a great day. Stay warm. Be kind to one another. God bless.